the GoLocalLive broadcast center in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island. 90 Way Boston Street. It's a terrible night weather-wise. A significant part of the state, I don't have numbers, but there are a significant amount of power outages. Trees are down. Normally I kid about this, but tonight's no kidding matter. Stay home. Enjoy the comfort of your family. If you're listening to the show live, again, I'll spare you my rendition of There's Got to Be a Morning After, but I have a feeling by tomorrow we'll be just fine. So tomorrow night, take an opportunity, come into the capital city, and enjoy an evening here amongst our local independent business people. It's been quite a show. The Goldwater Institute talking about an incredible moment of time in our nation's jurisprudence when we talk about the notion of forced public union membership and the free speech implications. Stephen Brown from the American Civil Liberties Union, and possibly, in terms of personal tragedy, at one of the most difficult crossroads in our recent nation's history, as we weigh the rights of the individual, rights that the individual were born with, their constitutional rights, and how to react to incredible tragedy. Cooler heads can prevail. Equally at a crossroads is our great state of Rhode Island. Joining me on the line, it was nice enough to call in. It was been a kind of a chaotic night. So many of our scheduled guests were without power, but it was very important that we make time for Bob Lancia anyway. Bob has been really at the forefront of two incredibly important issues within the last few weeks. One, that he had, as a member of a gang of legislators, the Gang of Four, the Gang of Five, had come together preemptively, if you will, to take an approach to address, let's just say, the challenges that face the Rhode Island government. When you're in a position like Bob's, other issues just sometimes foist themselves upon you. And the work he's done in the past few weeks, starting out innocently enough, if you will, with studying the scoops that take place out of government budgets, and how money, my words, not my guess, are misappropriated in an act of government malfeasance that I consider contemptible, led him, if you will, to a discovery that, ironically tonight, one hopes doesn't have negative consequences, as we are in the middle, somewhat depending on where you are in the state, in a weather emergency. So joining me on the line, he's a repeat offender here on the coalition, is Bob Lancia. He is your state representative from, let's see if I get it right, Bob, District 16?
That is correct.
I got it right finally. Bob, it's a challenging evening out there. First of all, how's your district doing weather-wise? What's going on out there?
Well, like everyone else, did a little drive around a little earlier, and some of the businesses do not have power. Some of the homes do not have power. There are, driving around some of the main streets, there are some tree limbs down, and they're trying to address that and stay on top of it. I heard Mayor Fung on the news earlier, and they're trying to stay on top of this with our Public Works Department. And as I watch the weather and the news, I'm one of those few lucky ones that still has power. But they're talking about, of course, the winds. And until they go below, I guess, below 40 miles an hour, which apparently is not going to happen till tomorrow morning, the guys and gals can't get up in those bucket trucks because of the wind. So it looks like it's going to be an early morning event before they can start doing repairs and getting people back with their power.
Right. And I think in tonight's conversation, we're going to talk about first responders. I think we have to take a moment and pause and reflect on the folks in those bucket trucks, the folks who, whether it be, the warriors, if you will, the hidden warriors at, Department of Public Works, towns across Rhode Island, whether it be the folks who work for the phone company, the power company in particular, and the gas company, who are out in, quite frankly, life-threatening circumstances, acting, leaving their family behind, often without power, to work on our behalf. yes, it's a job, but I would argue, Bob, that's actually, for most of the folks that I met to do that, it's actually a calling. We need to consider them in our thoughts when we talk about first responders as well, because quite frankly, they operate at some of the highest risk imaginable. So that brings us, actually, we've kind of flipped the challenges around, if you will. Because of the weather, I'm hoping, and you know, and I know you are too, that the 911 system, after a night like tonight, and I don't want to make this sound like it's, you know, a situation a la Puerto Rico or a situation a la Houston, but it's a difficult night, one in which people's lives are going to be challenged. Live power lines, you know, class 1 hurricane-like winds. We're going to experience all that tonight. Give us your
give us
your background on the 911 system.
It's so interesting too. We heard about one man, I guess, in Newport this evening. A tree broke off and a tree limb and killed him. So I mean, talk about needing emergency services. So absolutely, it is a tough night out there for those people working and those people who are out there just trying to live their lives.
Mm-hmm. So give us again a snapshot on, you were here with us just about a month or so ago. And at that point in time, the conversation was still somewhat focused on the appropriate, it was really an outgrowth of the Inspector General's conversation, if you will, and that was discussing the appropriateness of these scoops where money is taken from different budgets. And you mentioned, I don't want to say anecdotally, but as an aside, you mentioned that, okay, it's becoming clear to you that money was being, my word, not yours, misappropriated from the 911 budget. What's happened since then?
Well, thank you for asking. A lot's happened, actually. In fact, last night, I watched Katie Davis, investigative reporter from Channel 10, who's been working with me over the last couple of years on this story, and she was visiting up to the 911 center, and we finally got some numbers because I did hand deliver a letter to the governor asking for a meeting regarding actually 2 issues. One, a meeting regarding the 911 situation, and a second letter regarding the homeless situation. So I didn't get to meet with the governor, but I did get to meet with 2 of the governor's people on the 911, and I'm waiting for the meeting on the homeless situation with some of my local advocates that I work with. But during that meeting, one of the questions I asked was, what is the minimum manning? And so I was told at the time that there was no minimum manning. Well, last night, Katie Davis, for the first time, got some numbers. There were supposed to be, or is supposed to be, 47 people at the 911 center. Now, we have been saying right along that they've been down anywhere from 10 to 12. Well, last night we got evidence of that because she reported that they had 47 positions, but only 37 people hired. And of the people that were hired, of course, we had a couple people the week before that went out on stress-related leave. They had to go out, heart-related stress. We had another person was out due to a back injury. And then she was saying a week ago that they were hiring 4 new people. And again, according to last night, we needed 10. So she hired 4, and what happened was the first one of the 4 quit in the 3rd day. So, again, we were down. We had other people out, so they were really below the numbers they needed. But Katie Davis also reported last night that the governor's office finally gave approval to hire the 10 people needed to get the number up to 47. Also, she reported that one of the hallmarks of all of this is that they exhausted the overtime budget of $170,000 because, again, they're short people and they've got to pay overtime to those that are still left there. These people are overworked, they're under stress, and in fact, when I did interviews with Tara Granahan and also Gene Valicenti, one of the questions Gene Valicenti asked me, and it's something you just mentioned just a few moments ago. He said, there's this impression of state employees, lots of times. And I said to him at the time, I said, these are dedicated individuals who care, and they are working hard, but they are, again, stressed out, overworked. And the other point I made is it takes 4 to 6 months to train one of these people. And, you know, so you bring people aboard, 10 people, they're not really going to be ready to go, you know, for a few months. And the other thing is, the salaries they pay these people, the starting wage is only 16 and change an hour, and these are people that have to be trained for 4 to 6 months. This isn't like, you know, this talk about, you know, obviously continuing to raise the minimum wage, but a minimum wage worker making $15 versus a trained professional, 4 to 6 months of training, making only 16 and change. You know, what kind of people do you think you're going to get that want to go into a situation that is high stress? So, you know, I give these folks all the credit. But the other thing I learned too, this has been exciting actually. I had a gentleman from Washington call. His name is Adam Bender, and he has a newsletter, an Insights newsletter, and he had written about the 911 situation, you know, and he called me up to interview me. And when he interviewed me, he did the story, he wrote it, and what came of that is that members of the FCC called to my office asking about what's going on, because there was a great editorial in the Providence Journal, and two of these FCC commissioners, Michael O'Reilly and Jessica Rosenwalsel, said that states are stealing funds from 911 emergency service, and they suggested that they would be punished. And how they would be punished is that they would have a loss of federal dollars that would help pay for 911 upgrades. So during the meeting with the governor's people, because I had this editorial in front of me, I said, what has the punishment been? What has the punishment been for the state as far as loss of 911 upgrade funds? And they couldn't tell me. They said they'd get back to me. So, you know, a lot like, you know, with the UHIP where we were fined $900,000, right? Here, we had a loss of 911 upgrade funds. But, again, I think Katie Davis mentioned that the amount we had collected this past year was not $15 million, but $17 million. And of that, again, 911 ceased to exist as a separate entity in 2009. It falls under the purview of the public safety, under the head of the state police. It really only cost $5.4 million to run 911 if you costed it out as a separate entity. But what I also learned this past week is that $800,000 to $1 million is paid to a company called AK Associates. AK Associates' job is just to make sure that everything keeps running up there. So you can deduct $800,000 to $1 million off of the 911 budget, because that's paying not for the actual folks working. But so much has happened. And finally, to try to push this a little further, I've been reached out by the head of the Rhode Island Police Officers Association, as well as Steve DeToy from the Rhode Island Medical Society. They're interested in what I'm doing because they have some other things that they feel they can contribute to help make 911 a better system and be more helpful, even more helpful to people that are trying to access those services. So what I did is I said on Tara Grenihan I was going to call a summit, and I am calling a summit. I'm going to try to get all the providers from the emergency response centers for each city and town to the Cranston Central Public Library on Monday, March 19th from 6 to 8 p.m., and we are going to talk about the needs of the communities, you know, what's happening, have the medical society in, have the police chiefs head in to talk about some things, exciting things that they have in mind for 911, and also to try to get that money allocated where it belongs. And maybe we'll even get an answer to what's happened as far as the state being, losing possible 911 upgrade funds. So it's exciting. And I also learned this evening, this was very exciting, it is a bad night tonight. They actually are staffing this evening. Normally they only staff, originally it was 8 people at night. They said it could be 4 or 5 now. They had dropped the number. But you know how many people they got on tonight? 11. 11. So they're hearing us and they're reacting. And I'm very excited about that.
By the way, Steve DeToy has been on the coalition when we last year when legislation passed to allow for warrantless search of the prescription medical database program. The Rhode Island Medical Society is one of the oldest in the nation and has got a tremendous history. A quiet organization that most folks have never had to deal with. but it's just a wonderful organization. So let's step back for a couple seconds. First of all, you know, there's a sense, and you're right. Katie's done yeoman's work working with you in reporting on this. I mean, real gritty, old school style reporting, which is sadly, it's tougher and tougher to find these days.
Yep.
The notion of quick response is so fundamental to today's medicine. They're inseparable. And think of something like heart attacks and strokes, where literally seconds, a minute or two, can dictate really the future of an individual's life. I mean, whether A, they survive, B, if there's any quality of life left, depending on the severity of the heart attack or stroke. And then C, almost as an afterthought, because I don't want to put money and human lives on the same level, but quite unfortunately, the cost of the healthcare system. So at its most fundamental level, the failure of this administration, and probably previous, but particularly this administration, to provide the level of support necessary to successfully operate the 911 system reaches across economic boundaries. It reaches across. It's a fundamental human issue that has broad-reaching impact to the tune of a couple of $1 million, which, by the way, is actually being collected for its behalf. I consider that fraud, malfeasance. If it could be proven in any cases that folks either died or, again, the severity of the complications of the medical situation they suffered from, hell hath no fury. It's such a fundamentally human issue that in order to fund an out-of-control, bloated, self-absorbed, self-aggrandizing, self-interested, narcissistic government organization, government bodies, which is what we have in place in Rhode Island today, that they would knowingly put lives at risk is, in a life filled with outrage, is possibly one of the most despicable things I've ever heard in Rhode Island. Then, let's take it to the next level. The people who work there. Bob, you and I are old enough to remember the air traffic controller strike.
Mm-hmm.
There were, in any situation like that, there's good and bad that comes of it. One of the good things that came of it was a recognition of the very bad, which was the stress levels that air traffic controllers face as part of their day-to-day lives. Before then, I don't think anyone had an idea, unless you had someone in your family. Just the horrific stress. So I think there's a tendency, and this is not a shot at telemarketing people. I think there's a tendency for the average person, myself included, to think of folks who, well, first of all, if we even think, shame on me, if we even think of these folks who work at these centers, if we're even cognizant of them, to perhaps in our naivete or our self-absorption, accord to them a role not unlike the happy, cheery person at Time Life Books answering the phone for, the greatest hits of the 1950s. You couldn't be further from the point. These are folks who are, if as difficult as life is as a first responder, these are folks, the average first responder, how many calls do they make a night? Tough stuff. They're right there. They're right in the heart of it. These are individuals who are first responders their entire shift.
Mm-hmm.
Call after call after call after call after call. You call 911. Yes, we understand. We've heard all the stupid calls for pizza and the people complaining about their weed or something. But by and large, the phone calls they're getting are life-altering. They're dramatic. And these individuals find themselves on a nightly basis in the center of continual human tragedy. Gunshots, heart attacks, loved ones, lost children. I mean, my God. I don't know how these people do it.
I agree.
And so to not pay them a reasonable salary, to put them in positions where much like, and nursing faces a lot of the same challenges in a different way, where we put people in positions where they're undermanned, they're understaffed, they're undertrained, they're underpaid, and then expect them to routinely perform at a heroic level. It's just disgusting.
I agree.
I
agree.
And if we didn't have the money, and if it was a question of choosing resources between this and education and but we have the money. The money is collected. The money is stolen. People in this state need to start looking upon this as a theft of services. Money was collected for a particular process. It has been stolen from that process. And it has been stolen from a role fundamental to the safety of every one of our family members. So people shouldn't just sit back and say, damn politicians are moving the money. What they need to do, everyone needs to do is, at one time during this controversy, take a look around their dinner table and understand that at any one time, God forbid, and I mean it, God forbid, at any one time on a night like tonight, one of their family members could be waiting on a 911 call that, not because of the people who work there, but because of the people who run this state have decided that it is a higher priority to fund state house services or whatever, or a baseball stadium or any one of these atrocities that they do, and they do it potentially at the expense of a loved one in their family. Am I being over dramatic?
No, I can't disagree with you. And in fact, we talk about stress. My wife previously worked for the Rhode Island Tax Division. She was there 39 and a half years. So I watched firsthand, when we talk about people and functioning and the stress level and caseloads. And now we see it at DCYF. We see it at the Department of Human Services, the registry. It's just, and I remember Governor Chafee when he first got elected, and I give him credit for this. He went to each department to talk to the people, check in with them. But, I think, going forward in the future, I think any governor worth his or her salt needs to be on a regular basis going into these different agencies and finding out what exactly is going on, talk to the people that work there, let them know that, that they care and that they're going to do everything they can to make sure these places are running the way they're supposed to be, that they're adequately funded, and that the people working there who are professionals will be cared about. And I think that's a real failing. If I was governor, that's what I would be doing. And, when I put in my second bill, which was the Inspector General bill, which, again, we had a press conference yesterday about, and working again with Ray, and I know you've had him on, Ray Burick, from Middletown, former Army Inspector General, retired, and a gentleman responsible for getting the 10-cent tolls off the Secundit River Bridge. To have an opportunity to work with a gentleman like him on the Inspector General bill has been, again, for me, I just feel blessed and honored to work with this gentleman. But, he opened my eyes to, just looking at the budget as compared to other states. We've Pat? We've doubled our budget from $4.8 billion to $9.4 billion in just 10 years. Right. New Hampshire's only $5.7 billion, Maine $7.1, Delaware $4.1, a state of 900,000+ people on $9.4 billion budget. Where is it going? And during our press conference yesterday, Mr. Barabic said something that really caught my attention. He said nationally, the state tax bite per resident nationally is $6,700. Mm-hmm. In Rhode Island, it's $8,700. And he said if you take that $2,000, you multiply it by 1 million people, he says you come up with $2 billion. Crazy. We've got to start looking at every efficiency, every department. I think, that government is way, way out of control for a state this size. And it just doesn't make sense. And we need somebody to go in and begin to work on it. But also, our next governor has to be prepared to start doing that. And I think I related the story. A very public official, he came up to me at a function and he said, Representative Lancia, I got to tell you, I love, what you're doing with the Inspector General bill. He said, it's amazing. He said, can't we just get a white sheet of paper, he said, and just start writing down. Just let's start over. What do we need? What functions does government really have to perform? He says, just start with a white paper. Let's start over.
Right.
And really, in a sense, we've got to look at reinventing, how we do government.
Right.
I just don't see any option because we can't continue like this. I talk to people all the time working 2, 3 jobs, property taxes off the charts, and one of my senator friends from Delaware, he made a statement. He said, people from Delaware, are you getting the services that you're paying for? Are you getting the bang for the buck? And that's a question that I'm going to ask in my campaign going forward. Rhode Islanders, my fellow Rhode Islanders, are you getting the services? Are you getting the bang for the buck? And 99%, I think, are going to say no. And we've got to change that. And so this is why this election coming up, I think, is a seminal moment in the history of Rhode Island. I mean, we've got to begin to bring some different players to the State House. You can't expect different results with the same players. And so, and this, I think, yourself, we've got to bring some new people, new ideas, new dynamics to the State House because we've got to change this. We cannot do business as usual. People can't afford it. People can't afford it.
Now, the notion that somehow that the people who brought us to this point are going to have a deathbed conversion to, just I used to say fiscal sanity, I'm just saying fundamental sanity at this point, is insane. I had the opportunity a few months ago to sit across from the table in the Dan York State of Mind, Tony Pires, and at one point he pointed out in a rather interesting moment of revisionist history that the libertarian movement, if you will, could only exist in an agrarian society. And at which point I looked at him, I said, something effective, you understand that and he pointed out his 17 years in the State House. I said, you understand that you almost personally are responsible for the state of Rhode Island in the mess that it's in right now. So you're absolutely right. It's I think there was a great line in a Jack Nicholson flick, and it starts out with "This town needs," and I'll let each individual listener sort of fill in the gap. I want to take a quick second right now. I want to thank our sponsors again tonight. Beacon Shipping and Logistics. You hear me talk about them every week. They've been with us since the beginning. Beacon Shipping and Logistics, 1-855-3-SHIP-IT. Folks, if you own an automobile, if you just bought an automobile online, if Susie is taking out to college grandma's old Dodge Dart, or the family minivan is going to have a new life somewhere, and another family member's, Beacon Shipping and Logistics. Imagine, if you will, a shipper with international reach based right here in Warwick, Rhode Island. They provide shipping services for dealerships around the country. There's another customer of mine who uses Beacon Shipping and Logistics. They make state-of-the-art new energy transmission systems for vehicles. They use Beacon Shipping and Logistics to transfer to their the trucks that they use for experimentation, their engineering trucks, to bring them out to facilities in California, to Detroit, to all the different automobile shows about the country. They don't even shop anymore. They just call Eric at 1-855-3-SHIPPING, beaconshippingandlogistics.com. Again, whether it be Air Sciences, Beacon Shipping Logistics, Yacht Club Soda, we'll have another announcement next week. Folks who support independent media are doing it to support political thought and to help build the community. As legacy media collapses around us, literally, or gets hired by Gina Raimondo, the need for independent media has never been more intense. And there are so many different independent media outlets across the state. So take a moment and support the advertisers and the sponsors who support them. You're not having an hour-long conversation with thought leaders like Bob Lancia on a Friday night with the opportunity, commercial-free, to get intimately involved in all of these issues if it's not from indie media. We're not talking about Supreme Court rulings in a commercial-free process with folks from some of the smartest think tanks in America. Steve Brown gets on and is able to elaborate on one of the most serious challenges facing Rhode Island at this very moment from a civil liberties perspective, and he's able to do it in a manner that's uninterrupted, that is really the best of Stephen Brown. Thoughtful, a unique perspective, and a focus on the real issues that simply doesn't exist in 30-second drive-by television. Without all of the variety of independent media outlets in this state, whether it be Rhode Island Free Radio, Steve Alquist's new project, Motif, good friend Russ, he's got a project, Go Local Proud from Who Studios I Broadcast, and of course the coalition. I believe we would be in a far poorer spot in this state. Joining me again on the line is Representative Bob Lancia, he of District 16, the city of Cranston, involved in seemingly an exploding range of issues. He is right now Johnny on the spot. We started talking about, again, an issue, well, pretty fundamental to tonight's activities. The 911 system, overburdened, scooped, I'll use my word, stolen from, ripped off, robbed, to the benefit of a general fund. Who knows where that money being spent? We couldn't even follow the trail. Which leads us into the issue we're talking about right now, which is, of course, the Inspector General's issue. White hot. As we see government largesse gone wild, government expenditures gone wild. Today, by the way, or actually I should say yesterday, an important day in the month of too many Rhode Islanders, it being the first day of the month. And the first day of the month implies the receipt of public benefits. I'm not here to critique or criticize anyone who receives public benefits. What I am, however, here to critique is an organization, our state, which is so woefully incompetent at delivering public benefits to the point where, quite frankly, they continue to put individuals in harm's way. So UHIP ties, I believe, very neatly into the issue right now we were discussing, which is the Inspector General position. Now, postulate, if you will, a second, Bob, and thanks again for joining us tonight. The term, if you're a wrestling fan, I think the term steel cage death match comes to mind. Imagine putting into one steel cage UHIP and somebody like Ray Burberg. Who comes out alive? Ray, by the way, if you haven't had the chance to, is one of the most polite, genial, understated, tough as nails SOB that I've met in my lifetime. I ain't getting in that cage along with him. That's all I know. But is UHIP potentially, what do they say in the military, Bob? You're a veteran, a target-rich environment for an Inspector General?
Really. One of the things I did yesterday at the press conference, we talked about, the things that an Inspector General could do or help with. But I said, let's bring this down to a human level. I said, because really that's what we need to do. We need to humanize this situation. So I talked about the fact that last year we had a $60 million deficit. And to help balance the budget, the government obviously went in and scooped from various accounts. But for me, one of the most egregious was the Energy Efficiency Fund. Mm-hmm. She scooped $12.7 million from the Energy Efficiency Fund. That's that charge that's on our electric bills. It's supposed to pay, to help insulate homes and businesses and these kinds of things, and use that to balance the budget. And she took $1 million from Rhode Island housing. Again, we have a housing problem here in Rhode Island. We need more affordable housing. We need, places for people to live. And this year, she is going to go in and scoop $5 million from Rhode Island Housing. And I said, this is the kind of stuff that's going to stop. This is, the Inspector General, hopefully can, generate, some revenue by looking for waste, fraud, and abuse and efficiencies. Because, we have these fundamental needs. And, these accounts are being rated, to balance a budget that I think is yes, bloated. So, I try to bring it down to a human level. I drive down Promenade Street many mornings, and there's homeless people living under the bridge at the backside of the mall. And when I had my bill for the sex offenders at Harrington Hall in Cranston, my bill, I'm a Republican, so my bill passed the House, a bit of a bruising debate, but then it went over to the Senate, and it kind of just laid there. And then my opposite, my Senate colleague, Senator Gallo, put in a bill, and her bill passed the Senate and came over to the House, which it ultimately passed there as well. My bill didn't pass. One of the things that my bill would have done is give a 6-month window, because this has been going on for years with the Harrington Hall in my district, the place of last resort for sex offenders and homeless folks as well. But the 6 months was supposed to, I wanted to see, and you and I talked about this, bringing all the players together that, work with the homeless and those in need, both the nonprofits that raise their own funds as well as those that get paid. And what I wanted to know is, I wanted to bring everybody together and say, okay, what agencies are we giving money to? How are they using the money? Is it 97% for administration, 3% for services? What is it? We're sending people out onto the streets, 7 o'clock in the morning till 5 in the afternoon, on nights like this. Right. Days like this, and can we do a better job? Of course we can, but it takes will and it takes work, and we need to bring these people together. So that's one of the letters I did deliver to the governor, that we wanted to have a meeting about this. We wanted to get the figures, get the numbers, who are the players, and so this is the kind of thing. And so we look at last year, DCYF. We had 24 children die in DCYF custody. And meanwhile, they hired 35 administrators for $100,000 each when they needed 119 workers. Well, after this crisis, 4 children, and it was the time I was doing my sex offender, going from school to school with having hearings, 4 died over a weekend. And then the governor emergency hired 70 social workers, but she still needed 119. But we had 35 administrators. And I understand from my Senate Minority Leader, I think she shared with an individual, that the governor has hired, I don't know, maybe 89 people or something, $100,000 to $200,000 each, might be like $11 million. Prior to that, Governor Chafee previously had a semi-freeze on at the end of his administration, and that all went out the window when the new governor came on board. And, again, hiring, they joke about on the radio all the time, but it's not really funny, but talk about how many PR people that the governor has hired. Right. So these kinds of things, the children dying in custody. In fact, in yesterday's paper, I think it was, or today's paper, let me see, is it today's? It was today's paper. Front page, talking about a group home called a criminal enterprise by a Rhode Island lawmaker. And that would be Chairwoman Patricia Serpa from West Warwick. She heads the Oversight Committee. She's been on this issue with DCYF as well as UHIP. I mean, she's been doing a phenomenal job. But we've got a group home, a couple of group homes, where literally using a van for inappropriate purposes and using children for inappropriate purposes. And this place is still receiving state funds. And they said, shut it down. Right. And it's still operating. This is the kind of stuff that just drives people crazy. We should be, protecting. This is the state's job, to protect the most vulnerable. And I think when you fail in that task, you're failing as the most fundamental part that government can play, protecting the most vulnerable. So, this kind of stuff has got to stop.
It's amazing how it all is intimately tied into each other.
Yes, it is.
It starts out with a wrong-headed approach, perhaps innocently enough, that government can do this, government can do that, government can do this. And yet, when you look across the board, and this is where folks like us are called negative. By the way, someone calling me negative at the point is their last offense. That's an admission. An admission that they've lost control. I'm going to put you on the spot for a second. At this point in time, given everything that's happening, do you think this governor has lost control?
I don't know if it's lost control or not really tried to take control. Allowing things to operate, around, and it seems that it takes a crisis or pressure has to be brought to bear to bring about many times needed changes, where I think a more proactive, again, such as Governor Chafee did when he first got elected, going into these departments, finding out what's going on, finding out what the needs are, and then getting those results, getting those needs met, so that things run the way they need to run. But this is, I think, unfortunately, I think this is how it's been going along. And last year we had a $60 million deficit. We've been underfunding DCF year after year. Last year we underfunded by $7 million. Yet we could find $700,000 to hire 3 new politically connected magistrates.
I want to let that hang out there for a second. By the way, the management types have a very sophisticated term for the type of management behavior that you're discussing. You know what they call it? Management by walking around. Literally. Management by walking around. Management by walking around means you don't sneak around. You just simply show up in different places in unplanned moments where you're least expected, and just not interfere, but just simply observe, be a presence. Accomplishes 2 issues. You become aware of issues that were being hidden, sometimes consciously, sometimes subconsciously. But also the notion that if you have any level of authority or control over the situation, the notion that you could, in fact, be walking around at any given moment ramps up the pressure on people to perform, because they don't want to be that guy or that gal who's in the middle of a meltdown when you happen to walk around that office.
Yep.
The constant complaint I hear, both through media and through my own sources, is that we have an imperial governorship. That we have a governor who is completely top down, who is hopelessly out of touch with the exception of perhaps the much vaunted Commerce Corporation, which has become completely politicized. The state police, which at a high level has become completely politicized. Watching the state police being trotted around during the red flag parade, demonstration had to be particularly ennobling for folks who are familiar with the long, proud history of the Rhode Island State Police. But we have a governor who is, sitting on high, looking down and moving chess pieces, not managing.
It is really frustrating as a legislator, at least for this legislator, to see so much that's going on, so much that needs to be changed, addressed, to know that hardworking Rhode Islanders are, having so much taken out of their paychecks every week to run this government, and they are not getting the results, they are not getting the bang for the buck. And it breaks my heart when I see somebody working at a McDonald's or a Walmart who are trying to make ends meet, might be working 2 or 3 jobs just to meet their obligations, and to have this money being deducted from their pay, it just breaks my heart, because I see how so hard so many of them work, and they don't have, they're relying on people like me to be there with no personal agenda, just to do the right thing, to be their representative, to make sure that we are running efficiently, that we are spending the money, the way any household would run. And Representative Walsh, she was one of the gang of five, as you say.
Yeah.
Representative Walsh, Representative Shanley from Warwick, Representative Walsh from Providence, Representative Mendonça from Middletown, and Representative Vella Wilkinson from Warwick. We all, got together. We're from different, political perspectives slightly, but we all agree on this. And we all saw a need, and they're 4 freshmen. I'm only a second termer, but to come together, as kind of the new kids on the block, really, and see this and be willing and able to work together. I just say, why can't government work like this? So I've been very proud to work with the group of them, and hope to maybe work on some other initiatives with them. But this is it's just so egregious. It's hard to sit there, and so I'm going for it, because you've got to. I mean, the people expect us to do the right thing. They expect us to do what needs to be done, and that's my goal every day. And I get out there, and I'm at all kinds of different events. I'm in the various ethnic communities. My wife is by my side. You go to Universal Studios. You got those T-shirts you can get, thing 1, thing 2, thing 3. People are starting to call me Rep 1 and calling my wife Rep 2. So I said, I got to get some T-shirts made. She's by my side, and she sees the same thing I see. But there's need out there. And on that sex offender bill, after it finally got passed, you talked about Stephen Brown, so a great segue. But the ACLU filed suit to, we had put it in to limit the number to 10% at any state-funded facility. The problem was that the state was not prepared. They didn't take that 6 months, or it was shortened because we had that session that went longer, but they didn't take that time to bring the players together, as you and I talked about once before, and make accommodation so we wouldn't have to have a lawsuit from the ACLU. So now they're going to look at maybe, to get to find services and housing for, the sex offenders, but now you've still got your homeless. And who need help as well. So again, I see it as a total picture, and we've got to work together to solve this. And that's the problem. No one's working together. Everyone's in their own little silos, taking care of their own little whatever they think is important, or what their need is. A lot of times, people in authority. And I take it as a totally different view. You've got to bring the players together. We don't always need to pass laws. We don't always need to have study commissions. Just people sitting around a table and working this stuff out. And that's what we were calling for on that. So I can understand in that sense why Stephen Brown would have filed a suit, because this should have been handled differently. You can't kick people out on the street at 7 o'clock in the morning and let them out in all kinds of weather. No programs, no help, no services. We need more affordable housing. We need better opportunities, and they're just not there. And we've got to do a better job as a state. We've got to become more friendly. Businesses have got to look at us as a place to come and do business. And we have a lot of things we need to work on: our electric costs, our taxes, our regulations. There's so much we need to work on. But I think it's just going to take a different perspective, and hopefully, there's going to be some. Hopefully, this election cycle this fall, there's going to be hopefully some new folks, and maybe maybe a new chief executive.
Now, let's look at the legislation for the IG, Inspector General. So, right now, you had your press announcement. So you have specific legislation in the pipeline now.
Yes.
All right. That's for the General Assembly? Is there corresponding legislation in the Senate?
I had talked to the minority leader, our minority leader, Dennis Algier, and he was going to put in the companion legislation.
Okay. And so are you right now, are the 5 of you the current sponsors? Are you getting traction? Are other legislators kind of dipping their toes in the Inspector General's water right now?
Yes, we got over 30 signatures on our bill, over 30 signatures. Mm-hmm. So that was really encouraging. And when you have, folks from different perspectives going around the room to their various folks and saying, would you sign this? and they do. They said it's good legislation. So to get over 30 folks to sign, I really believe this has some legs. I know Ian Donis had called me up. I did an interview by phone. He said that he had talked to the governor, and she was open to looking at it. Mm-hmm. The speaker, according to Ian Donis in his 20 Things to Know that he just posted today, said that he had concerns about the cost or having another government entity. But this is an entity, I think, that has shown that for every dollar that is saved, it can generate many dollars more, maybe up to $12, 12 to 1, on many times on cost savings.
Now, what's the next step? I mean, which group does this go through? Judiciary? Does this go through
House Finance?
Okay, so it goes through House Finance,
Yep.
and ultimately, under whose budget does this come?
This is going to be a state-funded prerogative. So like anything else, like again, last year in a $60 million deficit budget, they can find $770,000 to hire 3 politically connected magistrates. Well, I'm sure they could find $1 million if this was important. So we want everybody. We want to get a meeting with the speaker. And we talked about that. The 5 of us talked about getting a speaker, the meeting with the speaker. We also talked about, at the end of the session, they always ask, what are your top 3 priorities, that you list down that you'd like passed. We all said we got to get as many of our colleagues as we can to put the Inspector General as number 1 on their list. And so, that's another thing we're going to do. So that's a couple of ways we're going. And of course, I know to stop, to get phone calls or emails to the State House, to the Speaker's office, 1,000 emails or 1,000 phone calls. I mean, that would begin to show that people want this, that it's important. So that's the other aspect of it. We've got to get people really lobbying and speaking on behalf of this legislation. So when I had the press conference, I invited folks from the housing community advocacy. And I also invited folks from the homeless advocacy. I invited the folks, Mr. Bastia, Ed Bastia from the Catholic schools, because I have another bill in that, we have 15,000 underserved families educationally in the state, and many of them are in the Latino community. And so I've been working with Mr. Bastia. We put a bill in. The bill would raise the credit scholarship, create scholarship money, credit for businesses. Businesses would donate. They can take a tax credit, and I guess the threshold right now is $1.5 million. That's the cap that we can have businesses donate and take credit. So my bill would raise that cap to $5 million, and that would allow many more students who are underserved right now. And I've been talking to many of my Latino friends in the Latino community about supporting that bill. But again, it goes back to whatever the cost would be. They say we don't have the money, and I say, well, if we had an Inspector General, we could find the money. And you really talk about fundamental rights, and Stephen Brown talking about that. I think quality education definitely is a fundamental right. And when we've got 15,000 underserved children, and the thing about this bill that is, and I repeat it again and again, is it does not take a single dollar away from public education. And the students, for the most part, that would benefit from this, they have to be 250% below the federal poverty level. So we are really talking about meeting a real need. And so, those are the kind of things I'm talking about, housing and homelessness and education, mm-hmm. the things that this Inspector General bill could really help with, finding additional funds, efficiencies, and, avoid waste. And so that's the kind of thing I'm working on, really, I think, financial and people-centered.
Right. When will you hear, or have you heard yet, about this being heard in committee? Do you have a sense of that yet?
They really haven't. They've been doing a lot of preliminary stuff. Every bill that I put in, or any member of my caucus puts in, our office administrator puts in a request for a hearing. So we know we'll get a hearing. It just, you don't know, when that could be. It could be this month. It could be another month. It could be May. So it really depends. The chairman really schedules these hearings, but the fact that we ask for a hearing, we do get a hearing.
It's clear through the PawSox situation that the speaker has finely tuned his ear out to constituent concerns.
Well, yeah, and he had quite the opponent last time, Stephen Frias, and of course the car tax relief and the PawSox were the two big things that Steve Frias really impacted this legislature with. And you talked about Tony Pyrus earlier, and I got to share this, but I watched the hearing. I was going to testify, and you were there that day, testified against the PawSox bill. And Tony Pyrus the night before, the Chairman Abney had ended the session, and he said, "Oh, wait a minute, Mr. Pyrus, who's Director of Administration for Pawtucket." He said, "Oh, he's got something we'd like to say." And he did say he was formerly the head of finance, and he said in his closing remark, he said, "I stood on the hill in the back lawn of the State House, and I looked over the city of Providence, and it was a desolate wasteland. And and then this person came in. I think it was a Pyramid Corporation in the name he used." And he said, he was like the savior of Providence, with getting the convention center and all these things, the mall built and all this stuff. But what happened is, of course, I said, and you heard me say this, I said, everybody's talking about this is PawSox, the 38 studios. I said, no, it's not. This is the convention center. This is where we were told from day one it would make at least $1 million. And in the paper earlier in the week, there was an article about the convention center, and they were saying that they had, we were giving them, anywhere from $20 to $30 million a year to stay afloat. But in addition to that, this past year, they lost $11 million. So that was not 20 or 30, it was $41 million. And, those numbers are crazy. And so talking about, you do that over 20 years, you're talking $600 million from an entity that was supposed to make $1 million, at least $1 million from day one.
A couple million here, a couple million there. After a
Yep.
while, that could add up to some real money.
It really does. And so I sent a letter this past week to the Convention Authority asking them, because they talked about how much money they generated for the city and the state. They talked about the different positions, the folks that they hire there, and how many events and major events they have, because, we've taken issue previously, the caucus, the Republican caucus policy group, we've taken issue with the number of events they have there that even if they had never built the convention center, they would have no more events than they would if they still had the Dunk, just using the Dunkin' Donuts Center. That we really haven't had any more events than we would have had otherwise. And so they were mentioning all the different events they had. So I asked for a breakdown of the events, all events, major events, the employees, the number of employees, I think it was 8,000. So I asked, what are their jobs, what are their salaries, so, hoping to get some information back on the convention center, because, again, for me, to be investing $20 to $30 million in an entity, plus it lost $11 million on top of that, that just does not seem in any way, shape, or form.
I'm going to make a request for you. I'm going to ask that as part of the Convention Center Authority, there's a little building called the Veterans, the Vet, which, by the way, is a beautiful spot, and I've been fortunate enough to see over the years my children play there. I've seen the Rhode Island Philharmonic play there. I saw Leonard Nimoy, interestingly enough, do a performance with children's children's choirs across the state in observance probably about 10 years ago, in observance of Kristallnacht, one of the most compelling performances I've seen in my life. But, and here's the but, we continue, this is my attempt at sophisticated humor, but I like to say that we have an edifice complex in this state. Not Oedipus, but edifice. And build it and pray like hell someone shows the hell up. And I'm convinced on a night like tonight, if the weather got much worse, we don't need to build disaster centers. We could probably, between the Ryan, the mall, the Dunk, the convention center, the vets, we could probably fit the whole darn state, into these buildings. So we build all this stuff, and again, where's the accountability? There should be, and maybe I've just missed it, but I believe that as part of a Commerce Corporation Bill of Rights, the Bill of Rights being for the taxpayer, that A, first of all, I'm calling for the dissolution of the Commerce Corporation, B, the sale of the Convention Center Authority and all its buildings, but a economic report card by an independent third party. There's a town in Ohio called Dayton, Ohio, and folks who are URI fans may understand Dayton as the as one of the over the years a thorn in the side of URI's basketball team. Not so much this year, but they've always been a player in URI's league. People who are in the military understand that it's the headquarters of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. The lead, my understanding is, currently the lead research and technology base for the United States Air Force in the world. Mm. They also have a minor league baseball team.
Yes.
And this little study became apparent to me because of the minor league baseball team. At one point in time, the PawSoxistas were all agog over, they were using Dayton as their example du jour. So I just Googled it. I mean, a tool, by the way, that I always commend to the Commerce Authority, they should try sometime. It's not very expensive. I think it's free. They could have learned a few lessons. But the city of Dayton uses an independent third party at arm's length of academics to do an economic study for the city on an annual basis. And they talk about in this study, it's remarkably accessible, it's out there on the web. They talk about, what the positive impacts, and what's working in the community. And they attempt to draw some real conclusions, based on numbers as to where it is, where it's going, and why it's there. And essentially acting as a report card. What was fascinating, it became to my attention because despite claims by the fine folks at your Pawtucket Red Sox Baseball Club that the stadium was a prime mover and shaker, this study didn't even mention the stadium. Mm. Completely absent. But at the same time, it went into some detail about what the other causes were to what appears to be a booming economy, which led me to two issues. Number one, the folks who own the PawSox are highly selective in their analysis of what towns are doing well. And unfailingly, they pick towns where you've got a great local economy and there's a minor league baseball club which is doing very well. Well, it's chicken and egg time. One would argue that the baseball club is probably doing well because of the high level of disposable income which is generated by a booming local economy. Compared to Gary, Indiana, which I do all the time, and the steel yard is a financial disaster. Mm. But the real takeaway, because there's always the symptom and the issue that brings you to a point, just like in all these different things that you're involved in now, was that do we as taxpayers really have any tool on an ongoing basis to analyze the performance of these, and I'm using the coalition air quotes now, assets? And I would argue that if these studies are being done, I have a feeling we're not hearing about them because if they were good news, Lord knows we would know, right?
Yeah, and that was one of the things in the article. They talked about the economic impact that they had. I don't know, it was maybe it was I don't even want to quote the number, but it was maybe $170 million impact. But again, just what you said, I think have an independent third party come in and make that determination rather than the entity itself. Right. And especially when you're losing that kind of money of $11 million a year in addition to the 20 to 30 that the state is giving you every year, and has been giving you for the last 20 years. I mean, it just doesn't add up.
No, it really doesn't. So I'm going to ask you if you could, in all that time, that 2 hours a night you've been wasting sleeping, to spend a few minutes of it. If somehow you could squeeze in, I'm fascinated by the vet because again, it's a beautiful building.
Yeah.
It's a lovely spot, but I just gotta wonder. It's one of those hidden little gems in Rhode Island government. It's what was it that museum that no one can get beyond the gates to see that we spend $100,000 on somewhere over by one of the lighthouses. It said hidden little gem that they're the ones that in the aggregate seem to cost us a whole lot of money.
Well, yeah, you've given me an idea tonight, so thank you for that. But I've got, as part of my look into the Convention Center Authority, I am going to ask the question, which wasn't originally part of the letter that I sent to them. It will be, I'm going to find out how they measure that economic impact, what agency or what entity do they use to make that. So that'll be fascinating to find out, and I will find out, and I will report back to you.
Excellent. Wow. So you and I could, we're never short of conversation, are we, my friend? We never really are. Tell folks how they can, we only got a couple minutes left, so tell folks how they can find you on the web. And, you know, more importantly, I imagine in the works is some sort of portal or information process. I'd love to help in terms of getting people out for this hearing, because I guess this hearing for the Inspector General's position is going to be critical.
Yes, it absolutely is going to be critical. So, yeah, we're going to really need people to turn out for that. And, yeah, the easiest way to get a hold of me is go to my website, which is www.robertb, B as in boy, Lancia, LANCIA.com. Right. And that's got my connections and all my information, what I'm doing, where I'm going. In fact, tomorrow, my wife and I, we're proud every year since I've been elected. We're going to be over at the mall, the center court in the mall. We're going to be doing reading to the children tomorrow as part of the NEA reading day. So Cat in the Hat, Dr. Seuss. So it'll be a lot of fun tomorrow. We love doing that every year. So we stay busy. But that's the easiest way for people to get a hold of me. Or they can call my office, which is 222-2259. They can leave a message for me there. But go to my website, again, www.robertblancia.com, or they can call my office, 222-2259, area code 401.
Excellent. Well, Rep. Lancia, again, thank you for spending a quality Friday evening here with us at the Coalition. Continued respect and best wishes for all your legislative efforts. We're going to wake up tomorrow, and I think hopefully all, we've already had a tragedy, as you mentioned tonight, but hopefully all will be safe and sound, and power will get back on. But again, it will bring new light and new focus on one of several critical issues you're discussing today, which is when we get up tomorrow morning, we need to understand 911. That's just important stuff. So congratulations on all your efforts. And
no,
of course,
thank you. And you have a great evening. It's always good to be on the show, and keep up the great work.
All right, buddy. And
thank you.
And love to the bride, too. Okay?
Thank you. Take care.
Folks,
Bye-bye.
Robert Lancia, General Assembly Representative, District 16, the City of Cranston, joining us here live in the Coalition. Well, it's been a hectic night. We've got a couple of guests that had to postpone because, well, they simply had no power. So we're going to try next week another shot at our right to try legislation with the folks from the Goldwater Institute. We do have a local rep who I'm trying to get squared away so he can come in studio and also discuss it because legislation is pending. We're hoping next week to cover this controversy, this law that's before the Senate now, passed overwhelmingly, which will take away, well, let's just say it'll impact us on two levels. Number one, at its most primary level, folks who are involved in sex work, and we had a 3-hour conversation about that last week, folks who are involved in sex work will again be further marginalized, further pushed into difficult, unsafe situations, and will continue to push an industry that's as old as time into the shadows, where we'll all suffer. But at the same time, this legislation, just like the red flag tonight, and Mr. Brown spoke so eloquently too, just like any legislation that involves speech, will ultimately impact the rights given to us by birth, and that typically are nurtured in a free society. Sadly, we seem to be moving in a different direction. So with that, I say good night. Stay tuned. We are the Coalition, loud and proud. Outrage, porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Media Network at the GoLocalLive Broadcast Center in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island. Take time out, by the way, this week. There's some wonderful programming on during the day. I don't speak about it often enough. Here at Go Local Prov. You may know them as a news website, but on this same medium during the afternoons, you can watch hours, if you will, of great programming centering around everything from restaurant life to the business community to good old-fashioned bare-knuckle Rhode Island politics. As always, that and this show can be watched at GoLocalPro.com. So the important things are, please like us at Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio. Please follow us at Coalition_radio. And again, these and all other shows will live in perpetuity at coalitionradio.us. Take a moment. We'll rebroadcast along with this broadcast the hour-long show we did a couple years ago on WPRO, talking about why you need to belong to the American Civil Liberties Union, Rhode Island chapter. Folks, stay tuned. We'll be back next week.